Ladies and gentlemen, please listen up. While I may not know you, and you may not know me, there are those of you who share an addiction, a common addiction with me, and I with you. It has been said that it is what you know that pays off in life. And it also has been said that it is who you know sometimes that pays off in life. So let me introduce myself. I am Lana Mack, and I am a tobacco addict. So now you know who I am, you know what I am, and who I am. But there's also a saying, you pay for what you don't know. So let me share my story of how I paid for what I did not know about this addiction and what most of you don't know, and that is that this addiction oftentimes chooses you and not the other way around. So, ladies and gentlemen, as far back as I can remember, both my parents smoked cigarettes. I was born in 1954, and so this had to be around probably 1960, where my parents, whenever they couldn't or would not be able to locate their cigarette lighter, or it was out of fluid, or their matches or whatnot, when they didn't have a device to light their cigarettes with, they would ask me or one of my siblings to light a cigarette from our electric stove in the kitchen. Now, of course, initially it would choke me and I would fan the smoke because the smell of the smoke was totally not pleasant at first. And then there would come a day when I would be confronted with a cigarette butt lying there in the dirt. The roads where I was born were not paved, and so the cigarette butt was lying there in the dirt. And I stopped, I looked, and I contemplated, but then I found myself picking the cigarette up, this cigarette butt, with no concern about germs or whose mouth this cigarette butt had been in before I put it in mine. I lit the cigarette. I have no idea where I got the matches, lighter. I don't even really remember what I lit the cigarette butt with. But just as I lit it, I can remember the sound of my daddy's voice. And it seemed to have come out of nowhere like magic. My daddy was furious. He was screaming, "What in the hell are you doing? Smoking cigarettes? Oh no, you're gonna get your butt beat," right? Now, as I stood there shaking, I can remember it wasn't so much, I knew my daddy was going to make good on that promise, because if he promised to whip your butt, oh yeah, you were going to get it. But it was not so much the fear of getting my butt whipped as it was this cloud of shame, bigger than the cloud of smoke that I had released from that cigarette butt. This cloud of smoke just surrounded me. And it was a smoke of shame, or a cloud of shame. I felt as dirty as the cigarette butt that I had just put in my mouth. I felt so much guilt and so much change, so much shame, that in that moment, I believe I transformed from being a good little girl into a bad little girl. And guys, I had always been a good little girl, and I was my daddy's favorite. Now, while I can feel the judgment out there, I can feel you thinking of my dad. What a poor excuse of a parent, right? What a hypocrite to introduce your little girl, your your 6-year-old little girl, 5 or 6-year-old little girl, to a cigarette habit and then turn around and then beat her for the same habit. But as I reflect back, it is my thinking as an adult, my parents, my mother nor my father had any idea. They were totally oblivious to the fact that in those few seconds, in those couple of puffs it would take for me to ignite a cigarette and pass it to them, I would suffer a lifetime of addiction to tobacco. And so, guys, it is that lack of knowledge, that ignorance, that lifetime of addiction that brings me here today. So now, guys, before we go further, we're going to move a little further back into the history of this tobacco, this addiction. And maybe we can discover how my mother and father became the addicts that they were in the early 1930s, when they probably were just beginning to smoke. So I bid you, ladies and gentlemen, as of October 12th, 1492, Christopher Columbus landed on an island in the Bahamas. The locals offered him some dried leaves as a token of friendship. This would be the old world's first encounter with tobacco. By the end of the 17th century, tobacco had become an economic staple of Virginia, easily making her the wealthiest of the 13 colonies by the time of the American Revolution. By 1558, Pierre-André the Vet, who had traveled to Brazil, published a description of tobacco. He wrote, "There's a secret herb with the natives commonly bear about them, or which the natives commonly bear about them, but they esteem it to be marvelous and profitable for many things. The Christians that do now inhabit there are becoming very desirous of this herb." By 1617, a Dr. William Vaughan wrote of it, Hail thou, inspiring plant, thou balm of life, well might thy worth engage two nations' strife. Exhaustless of Britannia's wealth, the friend of wisdom and the source of health. Tobacco, that outlandish weed, it spins the brain and spoils the seed. It dulls the spirit, it dims the light, it robs the woman of her right. These two verses, ladies and gentlemen, show tobacco has long been a controversial subject, considered in terms by some a vice, and then in other terms, or on other terms, a solution or remedy for all difficulties or disease. Now, can you imagine that? And then on another turn, an economic salvation, and a foolish and dangerous habit on another turn. Now, ladies and gentlemen, 530 years, after 530 years, tobacco still remains an economic staple worldwide and surrounded by controversy, might I say. CDC.gov reports 11.5%, which is a total of 28.3 million U.S. adults, still smoke cigarettes in the U.S. today. So guys, I'm prepared with not only my personal experience, but research to back my strong and firm belief that the e-cigarette, which claims or aspires to curb the appetite for the combustible cigarette, has been made just as addictive as the c-cigarette or combustible cigarette. And so ladies, in search to find answers as to why this new electronic device was not working for me, and instead of me quitting the c-cigarette, I just actually ended up picking up another habit. I went and I searched, and I wanted to know, because we as citizens depend on the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, the Surgeon General, the FDA, and the people who approve these products, and to deliver us or to educate and inform us before we make these choices and before we find ourselves addicted. It appeared to me that marketers were insinuating or, somehow trying to sway us in the direction that the e-cigarette is less harmful. The e-cigarette has chemicals, while the c-cigarette has a lot of dangerous chemicals in it. The e-cigarette has been developed with less harmful chemicals, right? And for me, that's not satisfactory because it still has nicotine. So there is that bit of insinuation or trying to sway one's mind that this is not a tobacco product. One would get the idea that because it is a liquid, oil, or that produces a vapor, that it is not a tobacco product. And the first time that I ever purchased this particular brand, this one here is called Views, I was quite taken aback to find the labeling says, warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical, right? And so we know that to be addicted to tobacco, which is why I call myself a tobacco addict versus a nicotine, is because it's all one and the same as far as I'm concerned. To be addicted to tobacco is to be addicted to nicotine. To be addicted to nicotine is to be addicted to cigarettes. To be addicted to cigarettes of any kind deems one addicted to the harmful chemicals. And to say that one product contains less harmful chemicals is not, again, quite satisfactory for me, because that's almost like, just to be a bit radical, but that's pretty much like saying that I can put, it is harmful, or it is less harmful for me to put beer in my baby's bottle than it is for me to put cognac in there. And so, ladies and gentlemen, after experiencing the electronic cigarette where I had failed to quit and it had not curbed my addiction to the combustible cigarette, rather I had picked up yet another tobacco habit, I felt the Surgeon General, the CDC, and the FDA had failed me once again, or just as they had my parents, and yours for that matter, in the past. And so I went searching for information. There is that saying also that information is power. And while there was an enormous amount of information, some of the statements left me still feeling the way I had initially felt, that e-cigarettes are just as addictive as combustible cigarettes or c-cigarettes. And the information that I found served to confirm my feelings. And so again, there was an enormous amount of information, so I'm just going to break it down and share the most disheartening. You know, they say information is power. And so while there was an enormous amount of information out there that I discovered, we're going to keep it short because some of the statements left me feeling the same as I initially felt, which is e-cigarettes are just as addictive as combustible cigarettes or c-cigarettes, and some just serve to confirm that feeling. And so I'm going to share with you just a few of the requirements, standards, or criteria that a new product, a new tobacco product would have to meet in order to be approved by the FDA, right? Okay, so first of all, a new product is oversees, or the FDA oversees all pathways to legally market and distribute tobacco products in the U.S. Number 2, companies must submit a pre-marketing application. Number 3, the applications are comprehensively evaluated by FDA scientists. Number 4, new products must be appropriate for protection of public health. And number 5, they must take into account the increased or decreased likelihood that those who do not use tobacco products will start using such products. And the most alarming of all, in the case of e-cigarettes, e-cigarettes must provide nicotine at a level that is essentially similar to that of combusted cigarettes. Now you tell me, does that even seem like information that would, or criteria that would motivate companies trying to market a new tobacco product to make it less addictive? Ladies and gentlemen, I say these very statements are what prove my theory or my beliefs and my concerns to be valid. And so, ladies and gentlemen, also bearing in mind the fact that the Surgeon General did not order tobacco companies to put warnings on the side of combustible cigarettes until 1966, I reflected back that my parents, and not to make excuses, but my parents were well-seasoned smokers by 1966. Unfortunately, my father died in 1968, just 2 years after the Surgeon General had ordered that cigarette companies put that on the package. My mother, on the other hand, had managed to quit smoking prior to, probably not 1966, but at some point in my childhood, my mother did manage to quit smoking. But be not fooled, my fellow nicotine or tobacco addicts. So guys, nicotine is an addictive chemical found in tobacco. Unfortunately, tobacco is a socially accepted economic resource that has fueled economies globally for 531 years to date. Addiction, on the other hand, is defined as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite adverse consequences. It is considered a brain disorder because it involves functional changes to the brain circuits that are involved in reward, stress, and self-control. I would urge my fellow tobacco addicts, do your research, be informed. Information is a powerful tool. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have concluded, as well as you should have by now, there are no safe tobacco products. Non-combustible as well as combustible cigarettes can lead to nicotine/tobacco addiction. It has been my pleasure to make your acquaintance, and thank you guys for listening.
Certainly aware of the possibility, and we are trying to take actions to prevent that. This device is different. It's bigger than most e-cigarettes. It's a little bulkier. It's much more difficult to hide. And the other important thing is that this device is actually not cheap. It's going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $90 to $100 for the device. You have to buy the sticks by the package, so you can't buy single-use type products. So we feel like the risk for youth uptake is probably considerably lower, just because it's not going to be as convenient. And then the other factor is that this is only available in the menthol and the unmentholated tobacco flavors. It does not have the multitudes of flavors available that e-cigarettes have. And the increase or decrease likelihood that those that are not using tobacco products currently will start using the products. So all of those have to be taken into consideration, in addition to the fact that we need to know that the product is going to be no worse than what people are already currently doing. So the comparison in this particular situation was with cigarettes. So in terms of comparing it to other products, that has not been done with this particular product, because the focus of this product is to get current adult cigarette smokers to switch to IQOS, and that's the way they directed their application, and that's the way we reviewed their application. So the IQOS provides nicotine at a level that is essentially similar to that of combustion cigarettes. It's high enough to satisfy the withdrawal and craving symptoms of current smokers. It is a level that would be considered addicting, so it would potentially be an addiction risk for someone that was not a current tobacco user that started using IQOS. However, it doesn't seem to be any higher than that from other currently available tobacco products, particularly cigarettes. So what this does is that it does provide a benefit for smokers that are going to switch to the IQOS. They're getting enough nicotine that they would continue to be motivated to switch and get some satisfactory results, and hopefully not go back to smoking the usual combustion cigarettes. It doesn't appear that uptake among non-users is particularly high, and